I'm Jody Savin, the New Haven Savins.
She's one of the producers and the writer. I'm Randy Miller. I'm the director. We're married, and I'm also writer and producer.
I'm Joel David Moore of the Portlandians. I don't know how you would say that. I play Joey Ramone.
I'm Richard the Klerk. I play Taxi. I'm of the
Canadians.
Yeah.
I'm John Holmstrom, and I'm the guy who used to hang out at CBGB's back in the day.
John Holmstrom is the founder of Punk Magazine and one of the greatest illustrators of all time.
And he did that little illustration there of CBGB right in the middle.
John, I'm going to start with you. How did you know to make a magazine you called it Punk? How did you know what this was? Nobody else did.
I read an article in the Village Voice by James Walken, and it described the Ramones in a paragraph, and I knew I was going to love them. And then Lisa Robinson had done a story about the way they looked for Cream magazine. So there was an awareness about the CBGB scene if you were a rock and roll fan. You went to every concert you could go to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we wanted to tell the best story we could, and it was a story of Hilly, really. It was a story of how Hilly started this club. And so you have television, you have some of the lesser-known groups that sort of started it, and even the Ramones were not known at the time; they just happened to become big. But it was about sort of telling the journey of the beginning of the club. So that rules out a whole bunch of bands, Green Day, and all the other bands later on. So that's what that's all about.
We do have peppered throughout a little bit of an homage to some of these bands that came later by putting them on the wall, even though it's out of time, out of period, and for some of the religious punkers, it throws them off. But it is a movie after all, and so we wanted to give a hint of what was to come. So we made some choices that were not chronologically accurate, but sometimes either the message of the song or the soul of the song was we felt what was right for that moment, and so we took a few minutes.
I mean, in the music, we don't just have the famous songs. There's a lot of really sort of obscure things on the soundtrack, and that we think that's fun. That'll be discoveries for people to discover. There's like 67 songs in the movie or something like that. There's a lot of songs that nobody's ever heard of.
There's some great discoveries we made in the process.
Yeah.
Like there's a Wayne County tune in the movie that was a discovery for all of us. It's a great tune. So it'll be great for audiences to find that, because I think it was pretty obscure before this movie.
Yeah.
Were there songs you wanted that you couldn't get because of licensing issues?
I mean, there's always there's some songs. I mean, we at one point we're going to have some more known Ramone songs. We couldn't figure that out, but we have we have 2 Joey Ramone songs in there. It's his voice. It is the same sound, but it's his voice. They're not known songs. And in terms of, there's a Patti Smith song that's like Because of Night, which was the Bruce Springsteen Patti Smith song that's from a little bit later in that period. We picked that because that song sort of is about the scene, about the concept of the movie. But it would have been great to have maybe another Patti Smith song from earlier. But it's always that sort of give and take. When you have a limited budget, you have to decide what's important, what's not important. Hopefully we made the right choice. I mean, that's what we tried to do.
Well, I play Taxi. He's the sound guy in the club, and Taxi's actually a character that's written. He's a mixture of 4 different guys that were soundmen in the club: Charlie Martin, Norman Dunn, and Cosmo Holmes, and Taxi. And I spent a lot of time with Taxi. He wrote a lot of stories. He's a very good writer, and he taught me how to sound mix. If you asked me to sound mix today, I probably could not do it. But when I was playing the character, what was amazing was that everything that he told me about the character was, there's one thing that you have to portray, and that's the love of the music. And I didn't know a lot of the bands. I'm a Canadian kid. So I punk, Green Day, right? Not television, Blondie, Ramones. It's just not in my vocabulary. So I had to learn all of these different acts, and then seeing the way that, like Joel David Moore comes in and plays this role, maybe Summer coming in and plays this role. I had the best spot in the entire house. So I just absolutely got an education playing the role.
Yeah, I think I think that overall it was really tough to kind of find how to get into the mind space and the realm of where we were. You know, I grew up knowing some of these bands. I was a skater kid, so skater kids liked punk. And in fact, the first shirt that I owned, band shirt that I owned, was a Ramones shirt because my parents were conservative and they wouldn't let any skulls and crossbones, and they're just, you know, just the pictures of their faces. And so that was actually the first punk shirt that I owned, and the most rebellious I ever got as a child. But playing Joey was interesting because he had a mixture of different accents, and you know, he was from Queens. He had a Jewish Queens accent off stage, and then on stage it was a faux Brit Queens Jewish accent that he would bring and developed into something else through time. So picking with Randy what we were going to go with and sort of what genre we were going to play Joey was fun and creative and difficult. And I think that really what we tried to do was just create the essence of the Ramones for people so that we weren't as much worried about what era, what exact time, what year we were in, what month we were in, and more what made sense for the overall, accessing the understanding of the Ramones.
What surprised you about him?
Everything. Joey was a very awkward fellow, and he did not want the spotlight. He didn't start as the leader of the group. He started as a drummer, and they needed somebody to sing, and he couldn't drum and sing at the same time, and it was just a nightmare. And so they were always fighting, and they were never happy. And so they ended up throwing him up to the top, and he started singing. And then he never did anything else. He just sang. And he was a very interesting guy because he was sort of the spotlight of that band. But off of stage, he didn't want anything to do with any version of the spotlight. So I think that probably we can kind of relate to that at some point, you know, when we're kind of doing something as actors or producers or directors, and then when you're asked questions about what you do, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm like here right now. This is fine. This is healthy.
I play a gentleman named Terry Bork, who was a band manager and music promoter, and who's no longer with us, unfortunately. And despite the fact that Terry was not a recognizable celebrity, it's such a gift and a luxury to have a blueprint of a character. You know, I mean, as opposed to when you're playing characters being fictional, and sometimes I'm sure you guys are mad. Like me, where you're just weeks or how do you start with this guy present? It's wonderful to look at the Terry. Oh, he had a beard. Oh, he wore a scarf. You know, it alleviates you of a lot of insecurities that you might have as an actor if your decisions are right or wrong. Nobody can argue that that's what Terry looked like. And it's wonderful. With that comes the responsibility that you have a more famous person homage. And I did track down some friends of Terry's and spoke with them. And I loved his passion for these artists and the support and generosity that he gave them. His fun-loving nature and Englishness. I'm nothing if not English, so I thought I could really contribute. And then I think the whole thing, I followed, I'm a fan and follower of many of these performers. What I didn't know, first of all, I think I harbored the same misconception that a lot of people do about the club in general, which is just this very hostile, drug, spit, mosh pit thing. And early on, later years it became more hardcore, but initially, we're talking about Patti Smith's spoken word poetry and things of that nature. It's such a diverse group of artists that were very supportive of one another, it seemed. And so that there was a real endearing vein through the story that touched me as someone who likes to support his fellow artists as well. But it was a very nurturing place, which is what surprised me.
And Johnny, did you have fun rocking the beard? And also, was it fun to go from the science world of Big Bang into this total rock star world?
Beard was no fun. It was about 105 degrees
big.
in Savannah.
I didn't recognize you that day. You showed
I was
up
like,
and sat
"This is
down next to me. I said, hi, I'm Jody.
That's good.
And was it fun to be in the rock world instead of the science?
Well, absolutely. I mean, selfishly, just to be associated with something like CBGB, which is so synonymous with what's badass cool, it's not something you just want to be a part of a paragraph and its history. And I really thought it was, I mean, like some of the younger actors who were in band television playing the guys, you know, they had never heard of these guys before. 20 years ago, you couldn't have made, you know, now there's such a wealth of information and research that we could all go to and online and things of that nature where you guys really did a fantastic job crawling into those performances.
Well, and it was interesting because sometimes Johnny and I think you got to hang out with Taxi, right? Yeah, they had to, you know, all of our guys have passed away. So, like there were times that your character had passed away as well, right? So there were certain people that were on set, and there were a lot of people that were involved in the CBGB world that helped us establish the parameters of where we were. I remember making some decisions early on, and Lisa had said, he wouldn't have done that, and we all kind of discussed like what to do with the smoking scenario. You know, like because everybody smoked back then, but nobody really knew Joey as a smoker, and so because he had quit pretty early on before the Ramones got big, so we kind of had to just made those decisions as we went. But just the wonderful world of CBGB is so interesting and unique, and something that was trying to bear a child of a certain genre of music that bared an entire other, you know, genre, and actually was the, you know, between collaborating between, you know, a lot of different artists was the born, you know, punk in and of its like roots, and I think that's pretty cool.
Lisa was very, very involved. Right from the very beginning, we talked to Lisa. I mean, we still talk to Lisa probably
Several times a day.
several times a day. She came over to our house yesterday. She's out here for the.
She brought me these punk CBGB earrings.
Well, what happened was when we secured the rights to make the movie, you know, it was really with her, and we had to figure this out. And then Lisa sort of hooked us up with everybody. I think hooked us up with you, John, and various band members.
She made this big, long list and said, this is everybody who worked there, everybody that hung around all the time, this is everybody that moved in and out of there. And I'm in touch with them all, so whoever you want to talk to. So we were like, well, we want to talk to everyone.
Yeah, it's like 100, we talked to more than 100 people.
Yeah.
You know, like, who are we talking to today? Well, this is the doorman that was there for many years. This was Taxi. This was Cosmo.
Sheeta Chrome, which
Cheetah
showed up.
Chrome was on the set too. Cheetah was one of the dead boys. Rupert Grint played Cheetah Chrome. So it was pretty amazing to have that wealth of knowledge and everything.
Talk about the casting, because the casting is, everyone seems like they were born for these roles.
Well, we had a great casting director. We worked with Rick Pagano and Cassidy Boyd, his assistant, quite a bit. But we were just really fortunate. You know, we worked with Alan Rickman for 2 other movies, Bottle Shock and No More Sun. And it was interesting because we cast him, and then we sort of started putting together the pieces. And the idea was we wanted to have sort of a mix of complete unknown people in some of the roles, like we did with Keith McRae, who plays Sting, for example. He was he open casting call guy, you know,
Yeah.
amazing.
Kid from Alabama.
Yeah, and
He
it
was
was
British the first time.
yeah, well, he
We
said
told him, don't-
we told him because Alan's actually friends with Sting in real life, and he came in and he did an amazing accent. He said he was from Birmingham, Alabama, and we said, no, you're from Birmingham, England. You're never going to say you're not from Birmingham, England.
So just keep that
So
out.
just keep that. So we kept that until he finished shooting, and then he asked us. We said, yeah, you can tell Alan now where you're from. So because we know Alan. So anyway,
Well, we saw so many people
many
for
people.
that role. And, you know, it's not a big role, but you just had to find something. Keen is actually a wonderful musician and singer.
So,
So
but
he really knew his way
So
around.
we sort of looked around and we had pictures, we matched people, and we figured out who could be this person. And we were just really fortunate it all really worked out. I think that the CBGB, the name, what it stood for, the club, it also really attracted people. Like Johnny said, it was a sort of an interesting thing for me to go do. And Joel.
And most of the crew were like really serious music fans, it's not punk fans. And so the extras casting person, Abba, she took it so seriously. She had pictures of, even non-speaking roles. The extras were
Band
cast.
members.
She would have people come in and they would have to be able to play because they couldn't fake it if they couldn't really play. And then we pick from a series of people, but even the extras look a lot alike. That was really hard work on her part.
Very accurate reflection of what the club was like. I think Alan Rickman does a great job as Hilly, and he's like the glue that holds that thing together. And I think they did a great job, Randy and Jody, of choosing Hilly as a way to tell the story of what happened at CBGB's back then. At first, when I heard about it, I'm like, Hilly, who wants to see a movie about Hilly? But he's like the straight man, right?
Yeah.
And everybody else is the crazy person.
Yeah.
And what I really love is they made it a comedy. They made it a funny film. So many rock and roll movies are so deadly serious and boring. And then when I saw this was going to be funny, I couldn't wait to get on board.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They all were. Merv, Merv was everybody's favorite person at CBGB's. He was a good guy.
And did he have an English accent? I mean, that's what he's sort of a fake English accent that he sort of put on.
Like a mild Scottish accent, I think.
And nobody was really sure, if he put that on or whether he was from there. He always wore a hard hat.
He spent a bit of time there, but we don't know if it was weeks, months, or days.
Let's
I
not
don't think it was
flyover.
years.
Yeah, he wore a hard hat all the time, and
Scott
nobody really
Hall.
knew why. And we would ask so many people, they're like, he just liked to wear a hard hat, That's
In the
right.
club.
Well, I think he was really like the bouncer.
Yeah.
And it really was a Hell's Angels bar when it started. That's in the film. But it's
Yeah.
not the Angels, but it was a biker place. But I was afraid to go to CBGB's at first because I was afraid of the Hell's Angels. And I remember being there when they did like have a big bar fight in the back at the pool table.
I don't think that was an unreasonable fear.
No.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you were like a long-haired hippie guy, right? And these bikers didn't really necessarily get along with those guys, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think actually that's an interesting question. I think the internet is CBGB for these people now. Like, I don't know that there's ever going to be another place like this, but with the origins of a genre of music. But I think like these little sites that you can go to, and it was MySpace at one time. Now it's something else. It may be MySpace again, depending on how good Justin does with it.
But it has sort of a, the mark, the CBGB mark, the sort of nostalgia, the mystique of it. People talk about it in that way because I've had those questions from people in Brazil. Say the same thing. Like, do you think there'll be another place like that? And I do think that there's something about the internet, the sort of, it's like everybody can put their music up there. People can put their videos up there. I mean, there are lots of artists that just get discovered because people discovered them on the internet, and that didn't happen back then. You had to perform at CBGB, and you had to hope that some manager, producer guy would come in and see you, and then you get to the next step. Nowadays, it can happen overnight. It does. These like TV shows, these internet things. So there's something interesting about that. It's a little different than it was.
Do you feel like there's a musical equivalent today, or that's even possible now?
I mean, a musical movie, you mean, or
No, just a musical movement to sort of originate from that sort of grassroots in that way.
It feels like there are a lot of people who are sort of reacting to the fact that you don't need necessarily a record company or a big label, that you can create your own music. Maybe it's interesting because Taylor Hawkins is in the movie playing Iggy, right? And they recorded. They're one of the biggest bands in the world, and they recorded one of the albums in a garage.
Of his, yeah.
Foo Fighters, just so that they could sort of show like you don't need all this stuff. And I think that's really what CBGB was. There wasn't a lot of producing going on there. They would just practice, they would do it. And John would even tell you these guys would come in, they weren't that good. They'd work for a few weeks, they'd get better and better and better. And that was like their sort of incubation period,
I think it's secular too.
Yeah.
In that, you know, something strikes a chord in pop culture, be it fashion music, fashion, and then it kind of snowballs and becomes very loaded. And I think if you look at the bands at the time, the top bands, like Journey, for example,
Yeah.
massive stadium tours with lasers and smoke in between, you know, and then when that happens, someone inevitably, I think, then breaks it down, trims the fat off, boils it down to the purest expression of what that expression is of art. And that's what they shared at that time in those hollow walls. But I think Jack Blaine is a pretty good example of kind of spearheading, getting down to the basics of currently. I think he's a great example. Personally.